Today's Tech Talk, DevOps Edition, is focused on connecting your Splunk Enterprise Logs with observability data for faster troubleshooting and cross-team collaboration. Tech Talks are a series of short webinars that are deep dives for technical practitioners. I value your time today, and I'm excited to share with you these best practices so you can leverage them on your daily role. My name is Jonathan Campos, and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager focused on observability, and I'm excited to be here with you on today's Tech Talk. We also have Subbu Bhaskaran, a Principal Product Manager at Splunk, who will be delivering today's demo. Today we're going to talk about understanding Splunk data and use cases. We're also going to go over the customer cloud journey and why observability. We'll also take a look at the need for observability and take a look at logs in the context of observability. And then finally, we'll walk through a demo on how to connect your Splunk Enterprise Logs with observability data for faster troubleshooting. We'll then conclude with some additional resources to help you continue on your Splunk journey. Let's get started. Splunk data and use cases has been pretty apparent to all of us. We use Splunk today with hundreds of integrations and use cases across IT and security, and it really allows us to search, analyze, and report on our data for security reasons, and of course, cloud data collection. It's really a great source to provide us with an overview of different data sources and allow us to really interpret that data. What we see today is that every company is on a cloud journey. They increase their business velocity, agility, and responsiveness, and are doing so by investing on cloud infrastructure and really just modernizing and building new apps. And the beautiful thing behind this is that it allows them to go to market quicker. We see companies where they start by retaining and optimizing on-premise, slowly move to a lift and shift model where they primarily start to use cloud infrastructure as a service, then quickly start to refactor to different services like cloud managed services like RDS, DynamoDB, and certain other dependent app components that allow them to take advantage of SaaS solutions. And then finally, we see that companies re-architect to more cloud-native solutions that allow them to have a cloud-first architecture. And some companies are born in the cloud, where they start with a cloud-first architecture. And the value here is that they have loosely coupled microservices and serverless functions. This brings for a much more complex approach because we now have different microservices that tend to be built for different purposes and specific solutions to really take care of a given part of the application. For an example, we may have a microservice that acts as the shopping cart service or a microservice that acts as the front-end service for a given web application. Well, with more complexity, we really need observability. We need to answer questions about our systems. Questions like, what characteristics did these queries that timed out at 500 milliseconds share in common? What's the service version? What browser plugins are we using? And to answer these questions, we begin to instrument our applications. And our applications then begin to produce data. And querying that data and answering our questions is where observability is helpful. Now, telemetry aids observability, and telemetry isn't observability itself. See, we instrument our application, and that instrumentation code is exactly how we get the telemetry that we need. And it includes things like traces, logs, and metrics, much more information to really diagnose exactly what's going on. We want real-time information so that we can help aid that new downtime, which is, of course, latency. And that's the battle that we're trying to fight. We want to try to find the answer. Now, we want to take advantage of this data, and we want to be able to relate this data and correlate it, the metrics that are associated with our traces, as well as our logs. And as system depth increases, and we scale, we have more of this data that we have to manage and maintain to understand exactly how our applications are running. So what do people do with logs? Well, of course, we use logs today to debug and perform root cause analysis and understand the why in finding that needle in a haystack. We can use it for security purposes to identify password failures or phishing attacks. We also can use logs for business analytics for comprehensive business analysis. We can also use our logs for auditing and compliance purposes as well. Now, logs are a big part of what we do for troubleshooting. We really want to find that needle in the haystack, but sometimes really finding what logs we have to look for is key. We want to make sure that we have an idea of where to go and where to look so that we can analyze our logs and understand the why and really find what's really going on. Now, Log Observer is a great tool that's designed for DevOps, and it correlates all of your log data within our observability platform. And Log Observer Connect really allows you to centralize your data so that you can leverage the power of Splunk Enterprise and leverage our observability platform so that you can get to the logs you need quickly and efficiently. This allows teams who are using the Splunk Observability Suite to take advantage of an in-context experience so they can quickly transition between looking at metrics, traces, and logs all within a single pane of glass. Access to these logs really bring a great experience and allow you to leverage related content links for faster troubleshooting and quick root cause analysis. Now let's take a look at a demo where Subbu will walk through how to connect your Splunk Enterprise Logs with your observability data. Here you're going to get a clear understanding of how your Splunk Enterprise Logs can be used within our observability solution for faster troubleshooting.
Hi, today we're going to be looking at accessing Splunk Enterprise data from Log Observer. Log Observer, for people who don't know, is a product within the Splunk Observability Cloud portfolio. And Log Observer allows you to query data from Splunk Enterprise and use the data in tandem with metrics and traces data that you have ingested into Splunk Infrastructure Monitoring and Splunk APM products. So let's first jump into how to set up the connection. So within the Observability Cloud settings page, you have the Log Observer Connect settings option. When you go into this page, you will see an Add New Connection button. Here you will find detailed instructions on how to set up and prepare your Splunk Enterprise instance to connect with Log Observer. Here, once you have done with this setup, Log Observer will be able to query data from the specific Splunk indexes that you have given access to. The first step here is to create a role in Splunk Enterprise and assign that role to a Splunk user. Now, make sure that you have created a role that has access only to data that you want exposed in Log Observer and in extension in Observability Cloud. And make sure that you have created a user with the appropriate number of searches that this user can run, because the searches are initiated from Log Observer by all the users that has access to the product. And all of these searches are executed through this one single user, which we call a service account. And based on how many users will access Log Observer, the number of searches run concurrently by this service account can increase. So therefore, if you do not allocate enough number of concurrent searches for the service account, your searches can get backlogged. Now the last step is to make sure that in your Splunk Enterprise Splunk Enterprise instance is secured with either a self-signed certificate or a third-party certificate. In here, we have given a link to you to the documentation from Splunk documentation to get the steps to create a third-party certificate. But if you've already created your own third-party or self-signed certificate to secure your Splunk instance, you can provide that information to us in the next step. If you don't have a certificate generated for your existing Splunk Enterprise instance, follow the steps here to generate the certificate and make sure that you have SSH access to your Splunk Enterprise instance and provide the certificates in the Splunk Enterprise system local directory. And once you have the certificate placed in this path, make sure that you are able to restart your Splunk instance for the certificate to take hold. Okay, let's look at how to set up the integration between Log Observer and Splunk Enterprise. Before we set up the connection in the Observability Cloud, we need to create a dedicated user or a service account in Splunk Enterprise. The service account should be assigned to a role that is good enough to query from allowed indexes. Make sure that you select the exact set of indexes that you want to give access to users. And keep in mind, at this time, the Observability Cloud does not inherit any of the access controls set up in Splunk. For the sake of this demo, I already have a user role that I have set up called Ollie. So let's look at what kind of capabilities that this role has. So for the sake of the connection, I have only given access to some of the search related capabilities. And similarly, within the for this role, I have only given access to indexes that I want the users in Log Observer to query from. So if I look at the indexes, there are many native indexes that come with Splunk Enterprise, and as an organization, you can also have many different indexes for different types of data. So we urge you to be pretty mindful of which indexes that you want to give access to users in the Observability Cloud. So for the sake of this demo, I have given access to application logs and database logs. And you can also do other kinds of restrictions on what kind of fields they will have access to, what kind of search results that they can get when they're querying this specific indexes. So having created the role, I will also show the service account that I've created for the sake of this demo. So as you can see, I have created the Ollie Splunk connection user that I'm going to be using to connect to Splunk Enterprise. And this user has inherited the Ollie or have been assigned the Ollie role, which has the ability to search Splunk indexes. And once you have set up the role, the user, and the third party or a self-signed certificate, the next step would be to provide the Splunk user and password that you created, the service account user and password that you created, and make sure that you enter the Splunk URL followed by the management port. And in most cases, the management port is 8089. So make sure that you provide the correct URL to your Splunk instance, and also make sure that your management port 8089 is open so that Log Observer is able to access your Splunk Enterprise instance. Give the connection a name, and the last step being upload either the self-sign or third-party certificate that you created in step 3 of the previous wizard, and you save and activate. The connection is effectively set up. All right, now that we have set up the connection in Log Observer, the next step is to explore the data. So this is the exciting part where you're able to access Splunk Enterprise data from within Log Observer in Observability Cloud. Here you have an index selection option, and in here, if you have multiple connections to either a single Splunk Enterprise instance or to a multiple Splunk Enterprise instances within your organization, you're able to create different connections as we have seen in the setup page. Now, pick up the connection that has relevant data for you, and it will list all of the indexes that you have assigned to that role and in extension to the service account. Now, I just want to look at the data in my main index, which I'm calling Mac, where I have data for my hipster shop application that I'm running. And within the index, I have data for all of my Kubernetes clusters, containers, and application. So in here, as you can see, you are able to see all of the debug data. And when I remove the filter for severity, which I currently only have for the debug data, I'm able to look at all of the different data that is coming from this particular index. Now, the data that I have in this index is ingested via OpenTelemetry using the HTTP event collector input, and it's stored in the MAC index in Splunk Enterprise. If I quickly show you that, so if I see index equals MAC, you're able to see all of the events that are in this particular index in the last 24 hours. Let's go back to Log Observer and look at what we can do with this data that we are accessing from Splunk Enterprise. Okay, let's keep in mind Log Observer is built primarily for site reliability engineers and developers that are looking at a specific application service or a specific infrastructure that is either running in a public cloud environment, and if you want to monitor in real time using metrics and traces, and you want to logs information simultaneously for troubleshooting experience. Like as you can see, the Splunk APM and Splunk Infrastructure Monitoring, they're all built within the Observability Cloud suite, with which Log Observer is also a part of. Now, by giving you the access to Splunk Enterprise Data, you're able to move from a particular Kubernetes node into a specific service that's running on this node and look at logs data that is appropriate for a service or a node. So you can go back and forth at different levels of infrastructure and applications. Now, given that you have access to all of this data, now as you can do in Log Observer, you are able to select a specific cloud platform from which you want to look at the data. In this case, all the data is coming from AWS EKS, or you can go into a specific cloud account ID. You can filter with any of these fields to further deep dive into granular data. Now look at any specific container or a specific host or a specific cluster and have information gathered from this specific cluster. So I can include this as part of my filter, or I can go one level down and look at a specific pod. And here I have different values for different pods. So I can probably just include this particular pod to see how much information I have. So I have 2,900 and odd events for this particular pod. Now what I can do here is, if I want to come back and look at how things have changed after I've made changes to this pod, I can save this as a query, and I can just say fluent d right. Not the most fancy name, but that'll do the job. So I'm just going to save this, and once I save it, I can switch back and forth to different saved queries. And if I made any changes to this particular pod, I can come back and look at the events for this pod. So I don't have to keep going back and forth between different data. I can directly go to the pod that I'm responsible for. So in this way, Log Observer provides you a easy way to access your Splunk Enterprise data, and you're also able to query the data using a point and click user experience, and you're also able to use that data in conjunction with Splunk Infra Monitoring and Splunk APM products within the Observability Cloud.
Thank you so much for attending today's Tech Talk. I really hope you enjoyed that demo. Before we wrap things up, I want to quickly share the resources available to you to continue your Splunk journey with observability. You'll receive these assets in a follow-up email as well as the recording. Also, don't forget that we have an incredible community of Splunk users on our community site. You can search the answers section on Log Observer and continue the conversation for this talk within the discussion section called Tech Talks. Here you will find additional resources, and finally, there is Splunk Ideas, where you can submit new product enhancements or vote for current ideas from other customers. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. Be sure to tune in for future Tech Talks. Now let's open it up for Q&A.